NHS mental health spending is forecast to reach 16.1 billion in 2026. Alongside hiring an additional 8,500 mental health workers 3 years ahead of schedule, the UK government also plans to make an additional £473 million available over the next 4 years for community-based mental health support. In a system that's previously been labelled as fragmented, reactive and inconsistent, these developments signal a growing recognition that mental health support cannot be confined to clinical settings alone. The voluntary sector, workplaces, and schools all have their part to play in promoting positive mental health. So, what could all of this mean for the future of mental health support in the workplace? Where does the responsibility of the employer end and the responsibility of the employee begin? Which aspects of support are most likely to benefit from AI? And what are some of the key lessons from over 10 years of leading one of the UK's oldest mental health charities?
If you're living next to a volcano and it's erupting a lot, you can take two options. You can learn to dance and avoid the lava, or you can move further away from the volcano. AI is helping us solve problems that are difficult for us to think through on our own. I'm really passionate about preventing people feeling ashamed of their own distress.
To explore these questions, I'm joined by Mark Rowland, current CEO of the Mental Health Foundation. Since 1949, the foundation has been at the forefront of research, policy and prevention, helping to shape the conversation around mental health and leading Mental Health Awareness Week across the UK. Mark, good to see you, and thank you for joining the show.
Great to be here, Matt. Thanks for setting this all up.
Excellent. So, look, we're here to talk about all things mental health in and outside of the workplace. I wanted to first talk a bit more about your kind of personal journey. I always like to understand a bit more about the person that's sitting in front of me. And well, previously you've spoken openly about the impact of losing your brother to suicide. Obviously, a deeply personal experience, but I'm interested to understand a bit more about your understanding of mental health long before you became CEO of the Mental Health Foundation.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's great to be here. Yeah, I had older brother, Daniel, 2.5 years older than me. I have a twin brother as well, who's also a psychiatrist and working in mental health. About 13 years ago, got a call to say that my brother had made an attempt on his life and had been taken into hospital. Yeah, it was a moment seared into my mind because he was struggling with depression at the time, and he had made previous attempts, and he didn't recover, and that was just obviously devastating. I say to people that any complex bereavement or sudden bereavement or shocking bereavement, it's like a mirror that just shatters on the floor, and your job is to sort of try to pick up those pieces as best you can and make sense of it. And that was definitely my experience. Took a long time, but I don't think I had thought that much about mental health in a clear way before that, just how important it was, what the do's and don'ts are, and importantly, just a bit like with compound interest, that you can have the reverse with mental health, like patterns of negative thinking and self-talk that's toxic can compound over many years, and it can have literally a devastating impact.
Some serious analogies there. What stands out most when you look back at that period now?
Probably for me, it's just it's the definition of tragedy, Matt. It's the definition that, suicide is a permanent response to a temporary problem. There was a way through. There was an answer. But he had reached a point in which he didn't believe it could get better. He felt he was trapped. And that's a real key risk for suicide, is feeling like there are no other options other than experiencing this degree of pain. But there were other options for him. There was there there was nothing wrong with him. He just had some stuff that needed to work through. So I just look back on that time, and I was very fortunate to have a loving family. I was very fortunate to be able to make sense of what had happened, both to him and to me. And that sense making is absolutely vital if you can draw something positive from those kinds of. And I have, I have drawn something positive from it.
Almost a sense of acceptance.
Certainly acceptance, but also growth. Like they talk about, I didn't know that there was post-traumatic growth that was possible. I didn't know that actually some of the most defining and difficult experiences of our lives can be the things that enable us to most fully become ourselves and use our gifts to our greatest potential. And it felt like a defining moment. I remember almost feeling like this is where you are going to have to you're going to almost have to be an adult now.
Yeah.
This is the real thing now.
Yeah.
This is life throwing something that you're going to have to manage, and you've got some choices about how you do that.
Well, firstly, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I mean, some similar experiences. So, in terms of losing a close family member to suicide,
Right.
but also the role that running now actively plays a part in both of our lives.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit more about the role
Yeah.
that fitness has played in your life
Yeah.
since then?
I mean, I've had like two traumatic events in my life. One was getting divorced and waking up one day and being told, I no longer by my wife that at the time, I no longer think this is working. I don't want to be with you. That was a big shock. And that happened a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years before my brother died. And then my brother died. So I started running after I got divorced and separated, just as a way of sort of processing. And I knew I was safe.
Right.
I wasn't going to do anyone any harm. It wasn't complicated. I could just be with myself. So that was in my early 30s. And ever since then, running has been, a source of consolation, but also like it helps process my thinking and emotions in a really constructive and useful way. But it also has been a source of great adventure, great fun, great camaraderie. I've had some of the, I would say, the peak experiences of my life have been through running. And so it's kind of been there at the lowest moments and the highest moments. It's enabled me to sort of experience both of those. So yeah, I love running.
You mentioned, I guess, peak experiences then. So
Yeah.
what would you say, looking back, has been the kind of, crowning moment in your running career today?
I mean, the peak experience that stands out is we did the Paddy Buckley, which is all of the peaks of Snowdonia, 47 of them. And
You only usually hear about two.
no, there's loads.
Yeah. Like
Snowdonia
Carib
is
Gok and the rest of it.
yeah. There's a lot, and the actual challenge is you've got to do it in 24 hours. We did do it over 3 days, but it was totally self-supported, carrying our own water, very, very hot. And you were going through bogs and trails which were not well established. So it was a fight.
Yeah.
And the third day, I was done after day 2. I'd given up. And we went back and I got my feet were in terrible condition. Got up the next day and I just said, I'm just going to do the first hour. And then I'll do until lunch. And then I'll do until the middle afternoon. And in the end, I made it through the third day. And coming down the last hill, the sun was setting.
Wow.
We'd done 10,000 feet a day, and about 25 miles a day, but loads and loads of climbing. And it was just going. And we were going back to see our friend, and then the sun was setting. And I just had such an incredible experience of inner warmth and fulfillment, satisfaction, and joy.
Yeah. I mean, talk about painting a picture. the sunset and from the sunset to the bogs. I also think there's a bit of an analogy there, and this is what I take from running as
Mm,
well, especially being a
mm,
trail runner.
mm,
In so much as when life does get hard,
mm,
sometimes you are forced just to take
mm,
it one
mm,
moment, one
mm,
hour, one
mm,
mile
mm,
at a time.
mm. I was literally being like the guy. One of our guys had to drop out because he got injured,
Right.
and the other guy was literally like, I needed his help. He almost had to push me up the mountain. We had very little food and very little water. I was right on the edge of what I could endure. And yeah, I think there are just so many lessons. And the thing about running is it gives you a great sense of self-esteem. Like setting challenges and meeting them
Mm.
helps to give you a bit of a backstory of I can manage difficult things, and that okay, has been really important for my confidence. A little backstory, a back catalogue of difficult stuff we've done,
Yeah.
I think is really useful.
Yeah.
Not in a kind of I can do anything. I'm impervious. I'm some sort of superhuman. But it's like
A
you,
little reminder.
yeah, because
Yeah.
you're humble because you know how close it's been.
Mm.
It's been a struggle. You haven't it hasn't been easy, and I think that's I love running for that.
Yeah. Yeah. You and me both. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. I think periodically I would be tempted just to look back at the old Garmin stats on that one, just to see the elevation and
Yeah,
the amount of calories burned. I mean, that's incredible. Um, so thinking about reflections over time,
yeah,
right? Thinking about the main lessons from 10 years at the helm of the Mental Health Foundation.
yeah,
So over the past decade, you've seen, I mean, I'm sure there's a number for this, but I'm going to say countless reports, campaigns, conversations about mental health.
yeah.
And with that comes, I would imagine, a unique vantage point with which to observe changes in society, workplaces, and also public attitudes
Mm.
towards mental health. So what would you say is something that you believed about mental health 10 years ago that's since changed?
It's a great question, and so much has changed in 10 years. I mean, let me just paint a picture of where we were 10 years ago,
Mm.
because I remember um, taking the job, and I remember when the royal family first spoke about their experiences of mental health, which was 2016.
Mm.
And I remember getting called onto CNN and the BBC and talking about why do we need to talk about mental illness? Why do we need to talk about mental health problems? Isn't that just a thing that just kind of is a minority issue?
Right.
It's a niche issue. Um, and that there wasn't a mental health minister in the government. There wasn't someone responsible for mental health or suicide prevention. So a lot has changed in terms of mental health being prioritized, it being recognized. Very simply, the extent to which human beings struggle psychologically wasn't fully recognized. We thought there was a small number of people who were mentally ill and everyone else who was mentally fine. Turns out it's not the case.
No.
Almost 1 in 2 of us will experience a period of poor mental health in our lifetime, and 100% of us will struggle. 100% of us will struggle. And I don't think I realized that when I think I probably came into this thinking I'm one of the people with good mental health, and there were probably other people. And actually my experiences since then, the power of listening to people with lived experience, it's just echoed and chimed with my own experience, and that's been one of the best things, Matt. It's like I'm working in a job which makes sense of who I am and my own inner experiences, and help me to have a less shame and more acceptance around what I struggle with in my own daily life. So I think that's shifted, like the extent to which there is a spectrum of mental health experiences that I think is much more common than we first thought.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and I think I also I also missed that, just how important big societal shifts. 2016 was pre-Brexit.
Yes. Yes, it was. Yeah.
2016 was pre the pandemic. 2016 was pre-Trump. And 2016 was before we had reckoned with the role of social media and its impact on young people.
Mm.
So I didn't sitting there in 2016, I didn't realize just how much political, social, global issues had massive impacts and implications for mental health, and probably underestimated made that. I was still in kind of like, I was still probably more concerned with how someone dealt with their own issues, or kind of thinking about mental health through an individual lens rather than a societal lens.
Well, there's a lot of lessons there. I mean, firstly, there's the recognition in that time frame that mental health issues aren't kind of the for the reserve of a niche segment of society. Through doing this kind of work, and I feel similar as well in terms of getting to hear about other people's lived experience. It almost creates a space where you can make sense of some of your own experiences as well. I think that's really important. But then also, just to your last kind of summary there, in terms of the different things that we now know, and have a clearer picture of how it affects people's mental health, and they are individual but also multi-layered, and or to use your phrase, compound over time as well. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
One of the shifts that we've seen is the move from workplace wellbeing kind of being on the margins back then through to the mainstream, which I would say is undoubtedly a positive thing. At the same time, not every popular idea necessarily delivers the outcomes that people hope for. So the question off the back of that is, what's one workplace wellbeing trend that's gained popularity in that time that perhaps concerns you now?
One trend I think that is, you see, we work with quite a few companies and you can see it quite quickly, is the focus on kind of doing sort of individual wellbeing activities, whether or not, but before addressing some of the more structural things that affect people's mental health. So that's frustrating. Like, I've worked with big transport companies who have given staff the opportunity to sort of do yoga in in the evenings, but they haven't addressed safety concerns that is causing, or the length of their shift patterns, or when they're and not allowing for reasonable adjustments in the way that they work, especially people who are struggling with their mental health. So I suppose that's frustrating, where you get kind of the easy pickings, but not dealing with issues around pay, transparency, fairness. Those are really important.
Yes.
So I guess the kind of nature of work and setting people up to succeed, and you can't make work easy and risk-free and a utopia. But the organizations that do it well think about well-being from and the evidence is really clear, because I've just done this for the independent review on the prevalence of poor mental health. The evidence is really clear that organizational approaches to mental health and well-being work better than individual kind of interventions around even things around mindfulness or yoga, or kind of having a well-being room, or those sorts of individual approaches. I mean, a classic one that employers get wrong repeatedly, time and again, is that they will do well-being activities, but they won't spot or work with employees who are struggling with their mental health early. They don't manage absence well, and you get the worst of all outcomes, where people leave the workplace. There's no plan to prevent them leaving, and there's no proactive plan to bring them back into the workplace. People, especially in relation to mental health, people feel like, I'll just leave it. I'm worried about, they just probably need space. But actually, what the evidence really shows, that both for the organization and especially for the individual, that support, trusting, thoughtful engagement when someone's off work, and making every effort to bring people back in when it's right for them, and as soon as possible, is better for the individual.
I mean, there's a lot of choice there's a lot of choice out there when and there's a lot of different directions that organizations can go where this is concerned. If there were, because you mentioned, the review and, the evidence.
Mm,
So
mm,
if there were, let's just say, I don't know, three evidence-based
mm,
actions that would improve mental health most in workplaces,
mm.
what would they be?
Well, one of them would be have a really tight and clear approach to acting early, preventing absence, and then managing absence in a proactive way. Like being really smart and effective about that. Last year we lost 22 million days to mental health
Mm.
related absence. It's over 50% of all absence.
Yeah, leading cause of long-term sickness absence lasting 4 weeks or longer.
Exactly.
Right.
So given and it's risen. It's since 2015, there's been about 1 million more people taking leave from the workplace. So that tells you two things. One is that there is not enough action happening before people leave, not enough engagement, understanding what's going on. Where are the pinch points? Where is the pressure? What does a reasonable adjustment mean for you so that you could stay in work?
Mm.
And then not enough action happening once people have left work to bring them back in a compassionate and sensitive, but also could be challenging way. Evidence is really clear. It's bad for your mental health to not be in work on absence. So
Yeah.
the longer you're off, the least chance you're going to come back, but the worse it is for your mental health outcomes as well. So we've got to have a system that is preventative, but also proactive. So I would say that's one. Linked to that is really good line manager support.
Mm-hmm.
Can you be human, compassionate, clear, honest, challenging? And here's the thing, Matt. Here's one of the things I don't like about some of the well-being approaches in the work. I think a lot of them are paternalistic. They're like parent-child,
Right.
not adult to adult. What you want to shoot for is a workplace, is an adult environment. You want to have relationships where you feel cared for and someone's going to tell you the truth about what you need.
Love that.
And I think if you can get that, and the fact that in a workplace it's not just, you need to be able to think about what is right for this individual, and also what's the wider ecosystem, what's the impact on the team. And it's kind of simple to just think about the individual, but line managers need to think about what are the impacts for the rest of the team and be able to weigh trade-offs, and those are sometimes difficult to manage. So I would say managing absence, line management support,
Mm-hmm.
and then policies that support psychological safety, and create kind of a culture of belonging and of active engagement. You want people participating in the workplace. So policies around bullying and harassment are really important, but also proactive environments where people are engaged is really important. So those three things, like places of belonging, ways to engage people, psychological safety, absence management, and line management training are the three best evidence stuff that employers can do, and it will have a great impact on mental health, but it'll also have an impact on productivity as well, which is just thrown in as a bonus.
Yeah. I mean, there's a big gap in the market for it. And that might sound cynical, but just talking about the data, according to the CIPD, it's only 29% of organizations surveyed as of last year actively train their managers to have supportive conversations about mental health. And the other thing as well, you mentioned about, being a bit more proactive in terms of, trying to keep people in the workforce. That doesn't have to be anything complicated. It could be something I've heard recently is just something like asking the question. So when somebody leaves an organization, you have an exit interview. And I heard an example, I cannot remember which organization it was, but somebody I was talking to, and they mentioned that actually one thing that they do are stay interviews.
Yeah.
So before that proactive piece, before anybody looks like they may be struggling or having a challenge, or actually they're off sick for some amount of time, they're actually having interviews to find out, hey, why do you stay here, and how can we do more of it?
I mean, it's a really key point. Stay in work plans, not just return to work plans. The stay in work is the preventative, and it's the reasonable adjustments is what you're entitled to under law, under the Equality Act.
Yes.
So if you're struggling with your mental health, you are entitled to, your employer is required to give reasonable adjustments, and that's really important. those conversations happening, but it has to have that sort of trust. The other thing we looked at is GPs offering sick notes when someone goes with a mental health problem. Now, the GP has another option. There is a maybe fit for work note. So the GP has a presentation of a patient struggling with mental health at work. About 93% of the time, a sick note or a fit note is saying, okay, don't go to work. But what we think is a much better approach would be to use the maybe fit to work. What maybe there are some adjustments that could be made. Maybe there's some changes in the tasks that are needed. Maybe there's some issues that need to be sorted out. But instead of just jumping to the best option is just to leave the workplace, maybe a better option would be a maybe fit to work. Let's see whether or not we could do condensed hours or make some adjustments to make this, to your point, to enable people to stay in work. And that goal of ensuring that people do stay in work if you can. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes you need rest and recovery and space, and that's fine. But we should be asking the question, is there a way to prevent that absence, because the outcomes of absence for mental health and the individual are so poor.
Sure. And just thinking about, this whole kind of preventative approach,
Yeah.
and thinking about the changes in terms of that approach from GPs, the workplaces, and also legally from the government. The new mental health care strategy from the government, it's recently been kind of announced. I think it was back in May, and
Announced in this office, I might add.
was it
We
really?
had the minister come here during Mental Health Awareness Week, and she actually sat in this room and met with young people, and launched it here, which we were very proud of.
I didn't know that, actually. That's really cool. So the new mental health care strategy it has the potential to influence how support is delivered for years to come. So leading up to that, the government's obviously hired an extra 8,500 mental health support workers, 3 years ahead of target. But very specifically, in terms of this preventative approach, it is going to look beyond clinical settings to consider the roles of schools, the voluntary sector, and workplaces in promoting positive mental health. So what do you think this could mean for the future of mental health in the workplace?
I mean,
Possible implications.
yeah, I mean, I think, we've touched on some of them. First of all, it's just really positive as an organization and as a campaigner in my roots. So I came up through human rights. So before I came into mental health, I was working on human rights and international development. And my first job in human rights was working to get some campaigning to get a human rights campaigner out of prison in Myanmar and Burma. And we did it.
I was going to say, how did it work out?
Yeah, after about 18 months, we managed to get the Burmese. We had such a fuss, they released him. I went, you guys are just causing. We did all sorts, like create a bamboo cage outside the Burmese embassy, lots of media, lots of campaigning and lobbying. But it was so satisfying to see the result. With this, over the last few years, our key call for the government has been, we don't just need more clinical resources when people get ill. The mental health crisis, and let's be really clear about this, Matt, like we are facing an existential societal issue in terms of the quality of people's mental health. We have in the last 10 years seen a very significant reduction in the quality of people's mental health, especially for young people. So the number of young people experiencing poor mental health has gone from about 15% to 25%. And it's having a massive impact in terms of the key thing that's happening as well is you're not just seeing greater levels of psychological distress, Matt. You're seeing a much greater reduction in participation in education and work as a result. So
is that NEAT?
So these are
the acronym, right?
Yeah, some young people who are not in education, training. Well, I don't know what the other education something and training.
Yeah.
I should know that. But yeah, and then to the point that we were saying earlier on, this has got a massive implication for employers. One of the key things
Sorry, it's education, employment, or training. NEET. We were thinking about it's Sorry.
That's it, employment, of course. So we have got, it's going to be a real focus of our next strategy moving forward, is helping young people transition into that first year of life and first year of work, and make sure that that is a positive experience. How can you equip employers? How can you equip young people? How can you open up those opportunities? And it turns out that that first year of working life, if you can ensure that that's a positive one, the life outcomes that you enhance as a result of that first year of life, if it goes badly, the scarring effect is very, very significant. So hopefully what I was saying is that we're facing this big mental health crisis where the data is showing that distress is getting worse, and it's not just mild forms of distress. We're seeing severe forms of generalized anxiety across a population that we haven't seen before. This is 6 months of distress with physical symptoms. We're seeing a much greater role of non-suicidal self-harm is rising very significantly. Sleep is an issue. So we've got a societal issue that we can choose to do two things. One is you can turn around to those young people and say, pull your socks up, guys. What is wrong with you? We didn't, it was fine for us. We managed.
I feel like that hasn't worked out well so far.
Right.
Yeah.
But also, or you can say, actually, we need a societal response that says, okay, there are some significant risks and challenges that we faced in the last 10 to 15 years, not least growing inequality, global shocks, and the role of technology. And the data really shows that we've unleashed this technology at a time of great uncertainty for young people economically and financially. And those things have come together, and they have had a really, really big impact on young people's mental health, especially. So the cross-government mental health plan is an attempt, and is a big campaign win for us. And it's really just a chance for us to say, actually, in the different domains of society, how can we create environments that tip us a little bit, that tip the odds in favour of protecting and supporting mental health, acting early, preventing, and doing what we call like a task shifting, which is enrolling people with, with whether it's community workers, whether it's people in schools, whether it's employers, in recognising their role in supporting people's mental health. They don't have to be psychiatrists or counsellors, but they need to be active in this societal-wide movement to say, actually, we've all got a role to play in creating the conditions for human beings to live with good mental health.
Yeah, I'd not thought of it in so much detail before. It's specifically in terms of the impact of, that first year of work for young people and what that means going forward. But thinking about what that means in terms of, I guess, the expectations that are put on workplaces, specifically leaders, and what we would describe as a reasonable social contract.
Yeah.
That there was. Look, one of the tensions that I find increasingly interesting is that relationship between support and responsibility. And you kind of touched on it earlier, speaking about that kind of how it's done at the moment. It's almost paternal, and we want to kind of shift away from that. Employers are being asked to do more than ever before, often with the best intentions. And I'm going to preface this because there was a quote you used several weeks ago now, with this in mind, and it was something to the effect of talking about employer responsibility or employee responsibility, and it was something to the effect of, specifically when it came to the mental health of younger employees, and it was something to the effect of, you may well have, or you probably will have, people in your workforce that are experiencing mental health challenges, and in many cases, this may well be through no fault of their own. However, they still have a responsibility to take steps or actions that are going to help. So with that in mind, what would you say are some of the, I guess, dangers and unintended consequences that come with unchecked expectations around leadership and mental health?
Oh, such a big question, Matt. And I think, it's great that we can get into it, because I think I was thinking about this, like because as a public health organization, there are the big gains that you can make in population mental health about changing the environments and experiences. It's not about kind of equipping individuals to do mindfulness and change their behavior. If you want a big population, if you imagine, right, which of these two is more sensible? If you're living next to a volcano and it's erupting a lot, you can take two options. You can learn to dance and avoid the lava, or you can move further away from the volcano. Now, in terms of mental health, moving away from changing your behavior, changing your choices,
Yeah, sure.
even if you don't think differently or have any more insight in your mental health, just moving away from toxins or things that are damaging your mental health will have a really big. So changing the environment, changing the experience, I think that those are societal issues, but individuals have a role too.
Mm-hmm.
Individuals can miss in two ways in terms of mental health. The first is that they can choose to dismiss, ignore, or suppress mental health struggles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can try and hide it. You can try and push it down. You can try and diminish it. That's
Sure.
one approach. It's a strategy. Good luck. It's not got a good track record of leading to healthy outcomes.
Sure.
The other way you can miss is you can be really interested and engaged in your mental health, prioritize it, but the coping behaviors that you choose actually create more harm than good. So just because you're more open about mental health, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that the coping mechanisms that you use will be healthy. So I think that's where individuals do have a responsibility to understand, like, when I'm struggling with my mental health, how can I manage this in a way that doesn't cause me more harm or cause other people harm?
Yeah.
How can I manage that in a healthy way? And there are some very common unhealthy responses, and we've picked this up in the data at last Mental Health Awareness Week, which are normal. You don't have to be ashamed of them. Most of us do it, but I think that's where the responsibility lies in when the struggle comes, managing that in a way that's as healthy as possible.
That's really interesting. Firstly, the volcano analogy. Great, that's gold. But also, I guess what I take from what you've just said there is, being more open about your mental health. While in theory, it's a good place to start from. It's not in and of itself synonymous with healthier outcomes. So, with that in mind, I mean, do you think we've become uncomfortable talking about personal responsibility when discussing mental health, especially when it pertains to the workplace and
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is that mental health struggles can be that kind of personal responsibility can be weaponized. It can be used to shame people. And so if that message is used to blame or shame, it will never have positive outcomes. So that's why there is some sensitivity. But if we get into the domain of saying that mental health is only about the political and societal issues and has got nothing to do with individual choice, you're treating people like victims. And it's really, really clear that especially young people, it's important that they're empowered, that they know that there are things they can do. This was really important for my brother. He ended up concluding there was nothing he can do, and he felt trapped and hopeless. So there is a role for responsibility in terms of giving people agency, giving people hope, but it needs to be done in a way that doesn't gaslight them and say, you should be thinking and feeling, it's your fault, or you should be, you should feel inadequate because you can't cope. So there is some sensitivity in it, Matt, but I think it's possible to be both compassionate. And here's the heart for healing, right? The heart of healing is that it involves being understood, being validated, and also going on a courageous journey of change and of exploration. And that's difficult. So both those things, and I know I'm wibbling on, but like the thing that concerns me is that sometimes if the response to poor mental health is always the line of least resistance, the thing that's easiest, that doesn't always help. And we need help to be challenged by someone who loves us and is on our side to say, hey, maybe that habit, maybe that response isn't, we need to find a different way of reacting. That needs to, that dynamic can be an incredibly powerful one.
Draw a line of some sort.
Yeah, we just need that sensitive challenge is part of the healing. It can't, and that's where ruinous empathy comes in, where you're only focusing on support and sympathy,
Mm-hmm.
but there isn't the trust or the space to be able to also talk about what needs to change.
So support and sympathy, trust and space, challenge, opportunity. Where do you think the responsibility of the employer ends and the responsibility of the individual begins?
It's a really tough question. I think when you talk about our organisation, I think the employer has a responsibility and a duty of care to ensure that they are not causing harm.
Yes.
So, and doing everything in their policy and their transparency to be fair and open and clear. So we often talk about fair, clear expectations. So employees have a responsibility to say, what do I need from you?
Mm-hmm.
What's your job? And employees have a responsibility to say, yes, I'm taking that deal, or no, I'm not. And then I think the responsibility is around as open conversation as you can around the sort of adult to adult to say, when you did this, it had these consequences, and you can have a really clear, honest conversation with staff about what they need and what an organisation requires as well. So
High trust and high accountability cultures comes to mind.
yeah,
A wise man once said.
yeah, and that's
It was you, by the way.
yeah. I mean, I think that's where we aim to be.
Right.
So really clear expectations, where you have a culture where a sense of belonging, where people care about each other,
Mm.
but also one where there is challenge,
Mm-hmm.
where people will speak the truth, and where people will know. So we've just talked about in our leadership team the importance of a feedback culture.
Mm.
So it can't be, where we're willing to be able to say, hey Matt, when you did that, that didn't really work for me. If that can't happen in an organization, it's not going to be a healthy one,
Sure.
because it's going to be thought, but it's just not going to be expressed.
Just on this subject of, leadership responsibility or leadership expectation and what we would describe as a reasonable social contract.
Yeah.
How have you found it navigating that kind of balance between the responsibility of organizations and the responsibility of leaders in terms of how they look after their employees?
Yeah, and I think when you work for a mental health charity, it is really important that I really care about my staff, want them to thrive. But I think I've been chief executive for 8 years, and there have been times where I've really struggled. And I remember during the pandemic looking back now, taking more responsibility than I should have done for trying to contain everyone's anxiety, trying to soothe people. I remember doing like daily videos, daily messages and reflections. I even did, I think I did a sort of like daily exercise class for if people wanted to and I just got exhausted. And I think, we were talking earlier on, I think my model of leadership was take maximal responsibility for the organization, but I know it's a cliche, but probably not in as much responsibility for what can I sustainably give. I thought I could just keep on giving, that there was no limit, and it turned out that there was a limit, and I got really tired and I got really anxious. And that stayed with me for a long time. It took a long time to sort of, I would say, really recover. And so there is a balance, and I think for me, my learning is setting out fair and realistic expectations with staff, but also leaning on your team, saying what needs to be done and who can do what, and being willing sometimes to say no. That expectation is too much. I can't do it. It's not fair, and I think over the long term, being tighter of what you can deliver and then delivering on it rather than promising too much and getting burnt out is the wise option.
Yeah.
Because it also provokes, because there's loads of resources that people have. It's not just you. Yeah.
I mean, setting healthy boundaries, delegating, setting reasonable expectations with your team, leaning on your team, as you put it, that, they're not necessarily new concepts. What would you say prevented you from doing that back then?
Yeah, I think growing up, my role models in leadership were the kind of all singing, all dancing kind of Ryder Rovers leadership, the hero model, where the leader takes all. And heard someone talking about, actually Michelle Obama talking about Barack Obama saying, you know, he never, he never cracked. He was always good. He was always strong. And I think that's the model I had. That was the expectation I had. And actually, I'd have been better off having a more modest view of what I could manage, and then really building and then asking people to come around me and asking for help. And I think that's really good role model, really good leadership, and also a slightly more sustainable one.
Yeah. You mentioned about what you'd learn and what you do differently in terms of setting boundaries, and obviously you learned that once it started to have a pretty big effect on you in terms of the anxiety and the burnout. Do you think there's a way that you could have, I guess, learned those lessons without the impact?
Yeah, maybe. I think it turns out that I'm not sure. I think for me, Matt, I needed to sort of reach the limits. We talked about this in terms of running. You reach the limits and then you learn. And I think I definitely reached those limits. And yeah, I think it just goes to show that everybody in an organization needs to know where they can get support. If you're going to talk about mental health and well-being, it's got to be for everyone, and everyone's got to have that sort of. And I think I just learned that, like, you can do a bit. Going back to what we were saying before, I think I'd have been able to be a better leader if I shared that load out more effectively. It wouldn't have diminished me. It would have enhanced my leadership, and it would also brought the leadership and responsibility from the rest of the teams more effectively. They would have shared, because I think, but because I stepped in so much, it actually signaled that for some people they could step back, they could be more passive,
Yeah.
and actually and that's your responsibility as a leader. Your number one responsibility is to get the most out of your people and resources. And if you overextend yourself, you actually diminish what you can get from the strengths of the group.
So your advice to either your younger self or a leader that might be watching this thinking, do you know what, I relate to that, and I would like to maybe avoid some of the ill effects that you mentioned. It's about making sure that you're practicing what you preach in terms of making sure that you've got support in place for yourself and sharing the load.
Yeah, and here's a test. Like, if you've never said no, if you've ever said no, I can't do that. No, I don't think that's a good idea. No, that request isn't something that we can accommodate right now. If you've never said no, you're doing too much. You're not making enough decisions. And I think for me, saying no is really important, because it makes your yeses more meaningful. And then, yeah, I think doing less but doing it well and doing it sustainably, I think is wisdom.
Excellent. Thank you. I'd like to talk about AI, specifically how AI can help or improve how people access mental health support. And you've previously mentioned, how that AI can help to enhance human experience rather than replace it.
Yeah.
Specifically, I know you mentioned around things like conflict resolution and social processing.
Yeah.
Which aspects of mental health support do you think are most likely to benefit from AI going forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's another area that we're going to be taking on in terms of the future of our work. It's going to be a big focus in terms of the use of technology and especially AI. First thing I'd say is we've got to learn the lesson of the last 20 years that unregulated technology just unleashed, especially on young people, is not ethical or healthy, because there's a commercial driver behind that product, and it doesn't necessarily have the well-being of the consumer as its first purpose. So make sure that the products are safe and any advice is properly regulated. So I think that's going to be really important going forward. But as I said, it's the technology that has been more quickly adopted than any other in human history. 1.5 billion people using AI tools since its launch in 2022.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think I was doing some research last year for, I think it was Loneliness Awareness Week,
Yeah.
and doing the stats on loneliness, but then also, how connected we are, and the AI usage figures for just for ChatGPT. It was
Yeah.
16 minutes a day on average, but also the actual user base had grown from, I think it was 500 million to 700 million between March and August of last year. It's
And when you
serious growth.
and I was also looking at the what people are doing on AI, and in 2025, the top use
Right.
is therapeutic and psychological support. It was number two in 2024, so it's always been there, but it's gone to the top.
Wow.
So people are using, and the second is like life organization, and the third most popular use is exploring your purpose, like finding meaning. So what I take from that is that AI is helping us solve problems that are difficult for us to think through on our own. It'd be great to find friends who could do that for us, but human beings are not very good at navigating the maze of their own minds. We find it really difficult to
Sure.
gain insight on our own behavior. And I think AI has a really important role in psychological problem solving if you can equip people to use it in the right way, and especially for men who, are struggling with having deep human connection and friendship.
Yeah.
And so those are I think it's got potential there if the information is accurate and informed. The other thing that I think has got a really big role in mental health support is in big data sets to be able to identify, to be able to help us triage and identify where risk is in the population, where there might be groups of individuals or families or communities who need additional support, and as we've done with other areas of public health, targeting support in the right areas. So that might be families who have a history of poor mental health in areas of great social deprivation. But I also think in that kind of diagnostic phase, do you remember the family doctor? They used to know the family, they used to get a good understanding of the different contexts that people were living in and get an overall picture of health. I think AI is going to be able to help clinicians who have only got 10 minutes have a much richer picture of their overall health needs, including mental health. And I think because an individual can engage at a lot more detail and so there are some risks around knowledge of sort of privacy and ensuring that information is held confidentially. But we have a massive resource scarcity in terms of clinical time to really understand human beings. And if AI can assist clinicians to be able to have a richer picture of what's going on in people's lives, I think that could be an area of real potential.
I find that prospect equally unsettling and exciting.
Right.
Just when you think about
Yeah.
the sheer range and scope,
Yeah.
and impact
Yeah.
of something like a custom GPT for a family,
Yeah.
so that the doctor can get just a clearer picture as to who's at risk and who needs
Yeah.
what,
Yeah.
because their time is, and availability is only going in one direction. I mean, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I mean, and you also mentioned as well, in terms of, populations that are at risk. So we know that, men are 3 times more likely to die by suicide. So, for example, or to your point about men that are struggling to have kind of, person-centered, empathetic conversations, I think there is a skew towards the male population in terms of those use cases that you mentioned about AI, in terms of, making sense of their life, finding purpose, and kind of solving therapeutic problems. Thinking about how AI is used in the workplace, what do you think? Because I mean, it's kind of everywhere now. Even if you realize it, even if you weren't really fussed about it, emails and the rest of it, Teams calls, etc. What would concern you most, if organizations became overly reliant on AI for well-being support?
I just try and come back to first principles, and I think the I the that here's my basic analysis is like AI should be able to save us time. It should enable us to be able to spend time doing the things that human beings can add value doing, and part of that is around collaboration, connection, social interaction. So I think if AI can be used to increase engagement and in-person participation in the workplace, that's really great. And in including social events or wellbeing events. So I think it could play a role there. I think if it's used to replace human engagement, we've got a problem. It's got to serve humanity, not replace things that are best done through and with people. The current people who are accessing mental health services is scary. It's scary how many people are facing need. If you look at the people who are most likely to access mental health services, it's white, middle class women, and especially within talking therapies as well.
Right.
So
I know it's skewed. It's almost the other way around.
Exactly.
In terms of it's like 2/3.
Yeah.
It's women.
It's something like 2/3 women using using talking therapies, and then it's about the same in terms of AI use. And so I think I do have a passion to equip. If men are going to be using AI, there are some really important tools to be able to get the most out of it, to ensure that the information is accurate and to get some insight. And I think part of our work going forward is going to be about this is a really important tool. If you're going to use it, some people are saying don't use it. That's a bit like telling kids back in the 80s don't have sex because there's a risk of HIV.
Sure.
That doesn't work. Kids are going to have sex. What you've got to do is have sex safely. People are going to use AI. How can you use it effectively? How can you use it to especially when it comes to your mental health, that avoids the risks and protects yourself but gets the most out of it?
Yeah, sure. And this was what I'd almost slipped my mind a moment ago. In terms of your strategy, you launched it two weeks ago. I know that it kind of focuses on there's 3 segments, I believe: working lives, bullying, and also online lives. I just wondered how this kind of segment we've been speaking about AI shows up in the online lives part of your policy.
Yeah, you're right. It's going to be effectively we want especially young people to be equipped with the tools and know the risks, know the dangers. So I think in relation to AI, it was just what I was saying before. It's making sure that the AI products, especially when they are dealing with issues around psychological advice and mental health support, making sure that those are properly regulated and that are safe, and that there is protection around your information and your privacy. And then it could be that we'll be involved in helping organisations develop effective AI tools. It could be that we are giving parental advice. It could be that we're doing, we're going to be doing some research on how young people are using chatbots, and using that sort of lived experience to help inform both materials advice, but also policymakers about where the dangers are and where the risks are. We're just really passionate. You asked me, like, what did we get wrong in the last 10 years? Like, as a mental health sector, we have been nowhere near on the ball enough about the role of technology and young people's mental health and neurodevelopment and psychological development. And we're just determined to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes with AI, harness the good bits, but protect her from any potential harms.
Nice. And future focus. 10 years at the helm of the Mental Health Foundation, you've witnessed progress, setbacks, significant social change that we've been speaking about just now.
Yeah.
How would you describe your outlook about the future of mental health, more broadly speaking?
I'm instinctively, I'm like a short-term pessimist and a long-term optimist. So I think I think we're going to face the next few years some real continued and sustained pushback on the mental health and wellbeing agenda. People are going to dismiss it. People are going to say we've had too much. They want to kind of return back to a kind of stiff upper lip. And I think that's you can see that in lots of different ways. There's a cultural swing that's going to come in the other way. So I think it's going to be a tough few years. But I think longer term, we're going to prove that prioritizing and exploring and valuing and protecting mental health is absolutely essential for human flourishing. We're going to look back and go, yeah, the people who are on the right side of that debate were right. It's the core of everything that we need in terms of creating a society that we want to live in. I'm optimistic. This week I was with my leadership team and we were at the People's History Museum
Right.
in Manchester. And one of the things it reminded me, Matt, was that social change, it like charted everything from the English Civil War right through to the sort of universal suffrage and the sort of Second World War and all of the different trade unions and political parties that were established. And it just reminded me that change over long term does happen, and you just need to be able to play your part and pass the baton on to the next people. I think I'm really excited and proud at the work that I've done at the foundation, the team has done, and I'm really looking forward to seeing, how they build on that and continue to take the fight to ensure that people's mental health is protected and supported.
Well said. So, a lot of the conversation around workplace mental health support is understandably focused on today's challenges, but, human beings over the course of time haven't changed nearly as quickly as the technology or the
Right.
workplaces
Right.
or society. So, what would you say are some of the guiding principles about mental health in the workplace that you believe will still be relevant in, I don't know, 100 years' time?
Yeah. Have you read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning?
I've heard of Viktor Frankl, but no, I haven't read that one.
He was a Jewish psychiatrist who was put in the concentration camps by the Nazis,
Hmm.
and he was a psychiatrist and he observed who survived and who didn't, and he found that those that had a personal sense of meaning and purpose in their lives were able to endure suffering. He had this great quote that said, you can survive any what if you've got a big enough why.
Right.
So I think moving forward in 100 years, the big challenge for employees that they're going to is creating meaningful engagement and purposeful work. I think AI is going to cause some real big disruption in that space, but we need it as human beings. It can't be artificial. So I don't think that's going to change, and I think workplaces are going to think really hard about what does delegation mean? What is the task that needs to be done? What does work actually mean? And I think it's going to change. But the thing they've got to focus on, and we'll focus on, is it's got to feel meaningful. It's got to feel like it matters, and that is so important for mental health.
And finally, after everything that you've contributed through your work at the Mental Health Foundation, if future generations only remembered one lesson from your work, what would you hope that was?
Well, the one message, I suppose, for me would be that it's so easy to be self-critical, and shame plays such a big role in mental health. So my big message would be that whatever you're experiencing is much more common than you think. The problem isn't you. The problem is likely to be what you've experienced or what's happened to you. The problem isn't you, and there is a way to prevent that problem escalating and living well. So I'm really passionate about preventing people feeling ashamed of their own distress. Like, that it's hard enough dealing with the distress. You don't need the guilt and shame on top. And just that simple message of you're not alone.
Brilliant. Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining the show.
Thank you.
Cheers. This has been Wellbeing Talk with myself, Matt Balfour, your guide to all things mental health in the workplace. Be sure to subscribe to the Let's Go Wellbeing YouTube channel, and we'll connect on the next episode.